What's going on, fam? Welcome back to the ride. You are with me here on the Dr. Eric K. Coleman Show. Please, ma'am, please, sir, subscribe to the channel so that you will be abreast to all content pertaining to this platform. Today, we are going to be commenting on a TED Talk from Dr. Trillian Small. She is going to be talking about overcoming the fear of love. As we move into the month of October, we're going to be dealing with this subject about fear of relationships. This is the October edition, and we're going to be dealing with certain topics about, overcoming the fear of love, scared to be in relationships, overcoming fear of intimacy, and overcoming rejection. So that's going to be the theme for the month of October. And so let's go ahead and jump into the clip for today as we will provide commentary along the way.
I love movies, and recently I was watching a movie by Tyler Perry, and one of the main characters was a single mother of 3 children, and her love life was absolutely nothing to brag about, nothing to talk about. But in this movie, she meets this drop-dead gorgeous man. I mean, he is gorgeous. And he treats her amazing. And her 3 children, he loves them unconditionally. But throughout the movie, she begins to push this amazing man away. And he was baffled by it. He said, what's going on? Why are you pushing me away? And in one scene, she said, I just got so scared because I'm so used to being taken advantage of. And him, confused, says, but why would I scare you? And she said, because you are everything I've ever wanted in a man.
So let's go ahead and stop there for a second and unpack this, which I know the movie that she's talking about. Tyler Perry clip, which, that's another subject. But the crux or the content behind this clip, it was a role played by Angela Bassett in one of Tyler Perry's films. She had 3 kids. She fell on extremely hard times trying to raise 3 kids. The oldest one was I believe he was a senior in high school, and her father had died. She was estranged from her father. She was born out of wedlock. She was as you would say, an illegitimate child that her father stepped out on their had a affair or whatever you want to call it. And so she was estranged from the family. No one really knew of her. And so again, she comes into the picture. She comes into the family. She meets this guy. They quote unquote fall in love. He embraces all of her kids, and as they're getting closer to one another in a relationship, she pushes him away because she did not know how to express herself or receive love, because she was so used to being hurt all the time. That's what she was accustomed to. And so what Dr. Small is going to get into here is that we will tend to draw back to something of a bad situation or revert back to bad relationships because it's out of the norm of what we've always participated in. And when it's something that scares us, we would rather go back to the thing that's comfortable or familiar as opposed to walking into something that is unfamiliar but is more healthy for us.
Now, this is a movie, but I promise you, I can totally relate to this woman's fear. A few years ago, I went to counseling, and I am a counselor, but I did want to go at first because I was like, there's nothing wrong with me.
How many of us said that there's nothing wrong with me? But she's actually going to get into this first point of discussion on today's show concerning the first chapter in the book of Paradigm, Thinking Differently About Relationships. is self-examination and how critical it is.
I'm good. But I'm telling my clients, yes, come to counseling. But I didn't want to go. But I ended up going because I kept having failed relationships. And I realized maybe it's not the guys. Maybe it's something within me that I need to really work through. So I was.
Come on now, say it again. It's that self-reflective look. If you are continuing to have failed relationships, it cannot always be the other person. Chapter 7 talks about your reality is not always, your perception is not always the reality. And if we don't take time to step back and think about, why can't I have a long or sustainable relationship? Is it always about the other person? And at the beginning of the book, Paradigm, I asked some leading questions that I utilize to get people's minds going. And those questions are my expectations and standard in the relationship distorted? Number 2, what influenced my perception concerning my and others' roles in relationships? Question number 3, do I do as much work in the relationship as I require the other person? Question number 4, what is my definition of a relationship? Question number 5, what examples in my life do I have that modeled a relationship, whether it be good or bad? Number 6, can I keep a relationship for an extended period of time? Number 7, am I the common denominator in failed relationships? And finally, question number 8, what are my worst and best relationships? And I didn't plan this, y'all. This was directly from my book. And this is what Dr. Small is talking about here. So these questions, these critical questions, are in direct alignment concerning the duration of relationships and how many we have had in a period or a dispensation of time, and being real and honest with ourselves. Am I the common denominator as to why relationships don't work?
I was willing to say, hey, put the mirror in front of my face. Let's deal with this. So after listening to all of my sob stories about all these bad guys and how horrible they are, my counselor, he's a male, he crossed his legs and said, Trillian, it kind of sounds like you're interested in dismissive men. Now, me being very intelligent, I thought, that's the stupidest thing. Why am I paying you?
I've heard this numerous of times that, we attract what we're attracted to. It's quite funny when we talk about people who have grown up in homes where there was a verbal or physical abuse, and we say that we will never do that. But what do people typically do? They follow the same pattern as what they were exposed to. And I just don't understand how we as human beings do that. But we have to make conscious and intentional decisions to break those habits and cycles.
Like, how dare you insult me? Like, why would I be interested in a man that is not even paying attention to me? But I left that session. I paid him. I left that session. And I thought about the different guys that I had been dating, and I realized, he was right. He was right. I was attracted to, and I attracted dismissive men.
Yeah.
So I then began to think, Trillian, what in the world would cause somebody to push away what is not good for them, or push away what is good for them and accept what is not good for them?
Yes.
So if I was presented with two different guys, it's almost as if I was to say, oh my God, what's wrong with you? Why are you asking me all these questions? Why do you want to take me out? Like, what are you, the FBI? Right, that's the good guy. While this guy over here, it's, well, he's not even texting me back. He didn't even call me. But 3 weeks later, he texted me and he just said, I'm good. You, with the letter U. Oh my God, he's so awesome.
Yep. She's right.
And I'm thinking, really,
right.
Trillian, what's your problem? So I'm thinking, really, what would provoke a person to push away that love and that support and that nurturance. And I realized we are simply hardwired to protect ourselves for survival. And I realized what would cause a person to push away those things that we deem good are two things: experience and association. Mm-hmm. So whenever we have an experience, we then associate a feeling to that experience. So for example, if a young lady was proposed to in Paris, she would associate Paris with love. But if a family member lost one of their loved ones to a bombing in Paris, they would associate Paris with grief. Mm-hmm. Then, if a mother lost her son in the hands of a police officer, she would associate a cop with hatred. Then on the other hand, if that mother lost her child and the police officer found her child, she would probably associate a police officer with gratitude. And I personally,
that's a fair point.
Associate canoeing
Association
with fear. Like, how do you associate something so fun with fear? A few years ago, my brother and I went canoeing. I was in the front, he was in the back. And 1 mile in, it's a 4-mile trip, 1 mile in, we are having a good old time. And I look over to the right and I see a stick. It was a red and a yellow and a black stick. Right? Mm-hmm.
What, that wasn't no stick?
You see where this is going. And so I'm like, oh, great stick. And then the stick raises its head, and I realize that's not a stick, that's a snake, and he is looking at me, and he's swimming towards me. And in that moment, I drop my paddle, and I turn my back, and I start screaming for dear life. I wish there was a camera to record this. And my first thought was, don't look at it because it won't see you. So that's why I turned my back. I don't look at it. And then my second thought was, jump in the water, get away from the snake, right? Because that's the smartest thing to do, Trillian. You just jump right on in there with the snake, great. Thank goodness my brother thought a little bit quicker and a little bit more rational, and he took his paddle and he whacked the snake to its death. Now, the snake was gone, but that fear?
But the fear stuck with her.
That fear was still in there. Because the moment we stepped foot on ground, I said, I will never do that again. I will never go canoeing again. Why?
So yeah, she just totally dismissed the entire experience or the event. I'm sorry. She dismissed the entire event because of a specific event or occurrence that happened during the event.
Why? Because it was associated with fear. So in this movie, what we can realize or what we can take away from that threat system is that our limbic system, when we are engaging in fear,
the fear
we
of
can
being
take
hurt
from
again.
those different scenarios, is that our limbic system and our threat system is being engaged. And so our limbic system is responsible for your rewards, your emotions, your memory, right? Your learning. So I'm not going to talk about all the different parts that are involved in the limbic system, but I want you to remember the thalamus. I want you to remember the amygdala. I want you to remember the hippocampus and the hypothalamus. So I'll explain. Your thalamus is responsible for taking in all of your senses, all 5 senses, the things that you're experiencing in the world. Your thalamus takes in that information. It then sends it down to your amygdala. I call her Amy for short. Amy gets that information. She looks at it, and she is responsible for your emotional reactivity. So she looks at it and says, either she'll say, yes, this is a threat, or no, this is not a threat. But she doesn't want to misread, so she sends the information to her assistant. I call her Miss Hippo. She's your hippocampus. Aptly named because she has a large filing cabinet of all of your memories. So hippocampus, Miss Hippo looks through the files, and she's trying to determine, have we experienced this before? And if she says, yes, but no danger, cool, like keep going with your life. But if she even remotely recognizes a sense of threat, whether it was real or perceived, a real or a perceived threat.
Hey, I'm going to stop there for a minute because she's hitting on some really good stuff. She's bringing the medical component here, the etymology of the source and the root of how things work within our brains, within our psyche. But that also goes, what I had just said moments ago concerning your perception is not always reality. But because of our lived experiences, we can sometimes take those threats, hurts, disappointments, triggers. We talk about a lot on this platform, triggers, and we can associate them with things that could very well not be threats, but because it reminds us of something, then we can arbitrarily project the past response onto a new person when in fact they could very well have not done anything, but because it was something that they did that could have been of a of a minute resemblance of what you've experienced in your past. Now we are responding in a way from a flight or fight perspective to whereas now we're giving the wrong response to an action that somebody else did, and it could very well be the wrong response because we're reacting instead of responding.
She says, "Oh my gosh, Amy, we are in danger." So she sends the file back to Amy. Amy sounds the alarm. "We're in danger." Real or perceived. Amy then sends the signal down to your hype man. He's hypothalamus, right? I call him DJ Hype. So your hypothalamus hypes you up. He pumps you with adrenaline and that stress cortisol, getting you ready to either do Creed 2, like Michael B. Jordan, you're either going to fight that thing out or you are going to run. Now, all while that is happening, the information is also sent to your prefrontal cortex, which is closely connected. Now, your prefrontal cortex is your executive functioning part of your brain. It thinks more rational. What it does is it looks at that information and it either confirms, yes, this is a threat, keep the process going, or your prefrontal cortex says, guys, chill out. It's no big deal, chill out. And then it'll cease, the process will cease if you have a properly functioning limbic system. So to make this more clear, if a bear was to walk into this room, your thalamus will see the bear and say, that looks like a threat. And it'll send the information down to your amygdala and your hippocampus. They'll confirm. Hype man hypes you up and gets you ready to either fight the bear or run from it. And then you are ready to take action. But then your prefrontal cortex gets the information and says, oh, it's a mascot. So then that whole system, everything that was just getting started to get you ready to fight or run, it says, oh, we're good. Just go take a selfie with it. We're okay. One of the things that I wanted to express to you all is that you can truly
she did a
be
very good
of love.
Explanation of
Every
that.
experience that we have is filed away and it's pulled for future references. But what happens if you file a memory incorrectly, especially as it relates to a threat? In the movie that I started with, the lady who was fearful of love, somewhere in her memory bank, there was a storage of information that said connectivity is connected and associated with fear and maltreatment. And the only way that her brain could have gathered that information and stored it in such a way was to have in the past reached out and tried to connect with other people.
Yeah.
And that reach was met with hurt.
Yes.
So remember, our brains are wired to protect us and for survival. So what do we do if we think something is even tampering with our survival? We fight it or we run from it. Yes, it's possible to be fearful of love, especially if you have never experienced true, authentic love. Why? Because things that are unfamiliar can be very frightening.
Yeah.
Now, there are different types of love, right? You have the relationship love, the romantic love, you have the friendship love. But I just want to talk today about that agape love. I mean, that unconditional love that when you connect with it, it gives you a sense of protection and security.
Yeah.
I mean, that type of love that truly sets you free when you connect with it. So if our responses are based on the memories filed, that means the fear of love is a memory recall issue.
Wow.
And it is a lack of knowledge.
Wow.
So here's an example. Guy. Baby, I love you. Girl. How do you know? How do you know? Right? We think that emotions are feelings. Sometimes they give us a little butterfly feeling. But love truly is knowledge and intelligence. Another scenario, friend one.
Oh, bam, right there. That was good. She said love is knowledge and intelligence, meaning these are two actions. And it's something that can be rationalized to an extent. You just don't say that you love somebody just based off of emotion. Well, some people will say that I love this person based off of the emotion that I'm feeling right now. That's just infatuation. You're drawn to them in such a way that it ignites, as she was talking about earlier, there are chemical reactions and things within our brain or within our psyche, within our bodies, that will ignite feeling and emotion within inside of us. However, when we really unpack this thing to figure out if we're really going to move forward in a relationship with someone, it should be from a standpoint, from a knowledge base and from an intelligence base to effectively navigate it, to respond, to think things through. To what she's saying, her point here is that it's just not rooted in how you feel. Love is rooted in our thinking, how we approach it, our response to things, and how we view it.
Girl, I really think you should get back into the world and start dating again. It's been like 5 years. Friend two. Girl, no, the last time I tried that, I got hurt. Memory recall issue. So what she was doing in that scenario was recalling the last time she did it, and it created a fear in the present for a future event that has not even happened yet.
Yeah.
So no, I am not proposing that we create a memory eraser. And sometimes I would like to. I'm like, if I can just erase that part right there, just that from that moment to that moment. What I'm instead proposing is that we create new counteracting memories that override the lies and the stories we have been telling ourselves. So you see, I believe that our greatest sufferings sometimes is not even from what actually happened to us. It's from the lies and the stories we told ourselves after the event.
And that's really true. She hit on something really good there. That a lot of times of what we tell ourselves, the lies after the fact, that it really stifles us from moving forward in life. If we've been hurt and we say, well, I'm not going to do that again because I was hurt the last time. I'm not going to trust again. I'm not going to put my heart out there again because every time I put my heart out there, it gets trampled over. And this is going back to what she said right in the beginning of her monologue here is, number one, our perception is not always reality. Have we taken this self-reflective look? Have we taken a self-examination? And are we associating our past hurts and triggers and comparing it to everything that we experience later on in life? And if it just remotely resembles our hurt, we completely run away. We shut it down and we push the people away who are really for our good. And we are continually drawn to the people who mean us no good just because it's familiar. And so that's something that we got to work through, but we got to admit this thing. And we can't always say that is the other person. And if you are always getting in a relationship with somebody who is hurting you, Whose fault is that? We cannot, or we can no longer place blame on the other person all the time when we have control over the people that we enter into relationship with. But we ignore the red flags. We ignore all of the things that we know is not right, but because it's comfortable, it feels good for that moment. This is what I know. I'd rather be with the beast that I know as opposed to going after and being with something that is unfamiliar to me because I fear what could happen. But, that's the definition of insanity. You're continually to do the same thing over and over again, but you are expecting a different result. So family, as we come to a close on today's show, I want us to continue to do the hard work of doing the self-reflection. Figure out, how do we show up and engage and interact in relationships? It can't always be the other person's fault. We control who we engage in relationships with, whether it be romantic or platonic. Now, rightfully so, when we talk about family members, we can't control who our family members are, but we can darn sure control how we engage with them. So family, continue to do the work, continue to do the self-reflections, and most of all, continue to think differently about relationships. Until next time, peace.